After Margaret Thatcher graduated from Oxford University, she became a chemist. Mr. Thomas, General Director, said, Miss Roberts is a research chemist by profession and is at present working in Colchester, but for a long time has been anxious to get a job in London. She is entirely dependent on what she earns, and I have asked her to let me know the kind of job she wants in case any of us here can help her. She wants a salary of £500 a year, and I gather would like a job in some big chemical firm like the ICI. Winston Churchill said this when Margaret Thatcher was running for the Dartford general election. Miss Margaret Roberts, the Conservative candidate, is pledged to support this policy, which I commend to you. I ask you to give her your vote in the full confidence that she will discharge her parliamentary duties by combining the care of your interest with the interests of the British nation. Margaret Thatcher's speech during the 1950 general election. We are going into one of the biggest battles this country has ever known. A battle between two ways of life, one which leads inevitably to slavery and the other to freedom. Our opponents like to try and make you believe that conservatism is a privilege of the few. But conservatism conserves all that is great and best in our national heritage. What is one of the first tenets of conservatism is that of national unity. We say one nation, not one class against another. You cannot build a great nation or a brotherhood of man by spreading envy or hatred. Our policy is not built on envy or hatred, but on liberty for the individual man or woman. It is not our policy to suppress success. Our policy is to encourage it and encourage energy and initiative. In 1940, it was not the cry of nationalization that made this country rise up and fight totalitarianism. It was the cry for freedom and liberty.
An extract from a report on candidates interviewed by Maidstone's division. Margaret Thatcher has a very pleasant personality, good speaker, calm yet forceful delivery, and very much to the point. Has a thorough grasp of politics, tendency to the right of center, a fine brain, great appeal. This lady should surely be in Parliament soon. Although Margaret Thatcher lost the Dartford general election, she gained an increase of followers. Report from Miss Cook. Miss Roberts will not be readopted again for Dartford, as she is getting married in the near future. She will continue to read for the bar after her marriage. I gather she intends to drop out of politics for a time, but to return later. As she is still only 26, she can well afford to do this. She should not be lost sight of because she is quite outstanding in ability and has in addition a most attractive personality and appearance. December Bride. Formerly Miss Margaret Roberts, the youngest Conservative candidate in the last election when she unsuccessfully contested Dartford. Kent, yesterday's bride, was married to Mr. D. Thatcher, managing director of a Dartford company. She carried a muff to match her blue velvet dress and wore a hat with a sweeping ostrich feather.
Lady Maxwell said, Miss Thatcher has married recently and formerly fought Dartford as Mrs. Margaret Roberts in both 1950 and 1951. She is a remarkable young woman who is not to be deterred from pursuing a political career. In spite of her recent marriage and the possibility of producing and bringing up a family, she is about to pass the last hurdle in her law examinations. John Hare said, I was delighted to hear that you had had twins. How very clever of you. How is this going to affect your position as a candidate? I have gaily been putting your name forward. If you would like me to delect, please say so. Miss Margaret Thatcher ran for the Finchley general election. Reports received from Central Office area agents on parliamentary candidates. Finchley, Miss Margaret Thatcher. In my opinion, a candidate who has everything it takes. Extremely good brain, attractive personality, good speaking, ability and capacity for hard work, The mere fact that she secured selection among 22 candidates interviewed by an association which was determined not to have a woman speaks for itself. Since then, she has won over all but the smallest hardcore of those who originally opposed her. Even the agent, whom she has treated pretty roughly for fairly obvious reasons, has nothing but praise for her campaign. I have hopes that she will make a mark in Parliament.
Extract from memo. Miss Harris to Mr. Caberry. A straight vote between Miss Thatcher and Langdon gave Miss Thatcher a small majority of 46 to 43. Unfortunately, there were a handful of people who refused to give a unanimous vote at the end. If this should lead to any trouble in the future, I feel quite sure Miss Thatcher will be able to overcome it. She really put up a first-class show and deserved a better margin. They are to adopt straight away and have decided on the 31st of July. Key cabinet post for Miss Thatcher. Miss Margaret Thatcher, MP for Finchley and Fern Barnett for over 10 years, became Minister of Education when the Conservatives swept into power at the general election last week. She accepted the job and set to work straight away, reading papers over the weekend. She was in her office at the ministry early on Monday morning. On Tuesday, she told the Finchley Press she had not been surprised by the Conservative victory. It was only the opinion polls which had led to confusion. As Minister of Education, Miss Thatcher, who is said to have one of the best brains in the Commons, holds a key position in the cabinet. Would she like to become the first woman Prime Minister? No, she answered emphatically. There will not be a woman Prime Minister in my lifetime. The male population is too prejudiced. Memorandum for Lieutenant General Brent Scowcroft, the White House. Ted Heath defeated as opposition leader. In an election on February 4th, Edward Heath was unexpectedly defeated as opposition leader. He received only 119 votes to Margaret Thatcher's 130. Miss Thatcher, Secretary of State for Education in the previous Heath government, did not have the required number of votes for a first ballot victory. But Heath has announced that he will not be a candidate on the second ballot 1 week hence. It is doubtful that Miss Thatcher will win on the second ballot. A more likely victor is popular Willie Whitelaw, whose last position was Secretary of State for Energy. Whitelaw lent his support to Heath on the first ballot, but it is almost certain to present his candidacy on the second. The New York Times wrote this after Margaret Thatcher was elected Conservative leader. Conservatives win British vote. Margaret Thatcher, first woman to head a European government. London, Friday, May 4th. Margaret Thatcher and the Conservative Party won a decisive victory in Britain's general election yesterday. After Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister, the British Broadcasting Corporation sent her this. Dear Miss Thatcher, warmest congratulations. It was a wonderful night for you and for us. From now on, people other than us will be making demands on your time, but I hope that from time to time my duties will bring me into touch with the Prime Minister's office. My first request of that office, and I promise you it will be my only one, is simply that when you have taken office and you come to do your first television interview later today, that you might consider my parting remark to you in your private office last September, when I said that my hope was to conduct the first interview with you as Prime Minister. It was a great ending to a wonderful campaign, and if you have the time to sit down and see all the film we have shot during the last month, we should love to show it to you. Kind regards, yours sincerely, Michael D. Cole. Margaret Thatcher was the first woman Prime Minister of Great Britain. She served 3 terms as Prime Minister, which lasted from 1979 until her resignation in 1990.
Margaret Thatcher's speech after becoming Prime Minister. Very excited, very aware of the responsibilities. Her Majesty the Queen has asked me to form a new administration, and I have accepted. It is, of course, the greatest honor that I can come to any citizen in a democracy. I know full well of the responsibilities that await me as I enter the door of number 10, and I'll strive unceasingly to try to fulfill the trust and confidence that the British people have placed in me and the things in which I believe. And I would just like to remember some words of St. Francis aside, which I think are really just particularly apt at the moment. Where there is discord, may we bring harmony. Where there is error, may we bring truth. Where there is doubt, may we bring faith, and where there is despair, may we bring hope. And to all the British people, howsoever they voted, may I say this: now that the election is over, may we get together and strive to serve and strengthen the country of which we're so proud to be a part. And finally, one last thing, in the words of Ari Neve, whom we had hoped to bring here with us, there is now work to be done.
Daniel Hannan said this regarding Margaret Thatcher's efforts as Prime Minister. Margaret Thatcher, almost alone, refused to accept the inevitability of decline. She was determined to turn the country around, and she succeeded. Inflation fell, strikes stopped, the Latin enterprise of free people was awakened. Having lagged behind for a generation, we outgrew every European country in the 1980s except Spain, which was bouncing back from an even lower place. As revenues flowed in, taxes were cut and debt was repaid, while public spending, contrary to almost universal belief, rose.
Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher were close friends. They more than liked each other. George Sloots, President Reagan's Secretary of State, writes at the Daily Beast, they were ideological soulmates, not because she was pro-American or that the president was pro-British, but because they saw the world in similar ways, particularly the Cold War and the vitality of Western economies.
John Boner said this: today Republicans are as fond of the pair as ever. Americans will always keep Lady Thatcher in our hearts for her loyalty to Ronald Reagan and their friendship that we all admired.
In Margaret Thatcher's eulogy for President Reagan, she said, "We have lost a great president, a great American, and a great man, and I have lost a dear friend."
Margaret Thatcher said this of Mr. Gorbachev: I am cautiously optimistic. I like Mr. Gorbachev. We can do business together. We both believe in our own political systems. He firmly believes in his. I firmly believe in mine. We are never going to change one another, so that is not in doubt. But we have two great interests in common, that we should both do everything we can to see that war never starts again, and therefore we go into the disarmament talks, determined to make them succeed. And secondly, I think we both believe that they are the more likely to succeed if we can build up confidence in one another and trust in one another about each other's approach. And therefore, we believe in cooperating on trade matters, on cultural matters, on quite a lot of contacts between politicians from the two sides of the divide.
The Iron Lady, Mikhail Gorbachev Memoirs, 1995. Mrs. Thatcher is a confident, and I would say a self-confident woman. The gentle charm and feminine facade disguising a rather tough and pragmatic politician. His nickname, the Iron Lady, is very apt. I told Mrs. Thatcher, I know you are a person of staunch beliefs, someone who adheres to certain principles and values. This commands respect. But please consider that next to you is a person of your own ilk, and I can assure you that I am not under instructions from the Politburo to persuade you to join the Communist Party. Now Gardner wrote this after Margaret Thatcher's death. I have just returned to Washington from London, where I attended the funeral of Lady Thatcher. Many Telegraph writers have described the deeply moving and truly beautiful service held at St. Paul's Cathedral.